Welcome back. My guest in this segment is Anthony Dutton. He's the CEO of Cannex Capital, trading on the CSE under the symbol CNNX. And if you don't know anything about Cannex, they are Washington State's premier grower and are expanding into a multi-state play in the Western United States. Could it be? Anthony, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me again. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Anthony, you're sort of halfway through a transaction with a company called Jetty Extracts.
Jetty Extracts, yes.
And they are by all accounts, a well and truly respected brand of extract products throughout the state of California.
Correct. They're one of the largest extraction companies in California, based in Oakland.
Yeah.
They have very wide distribution through their own distribution network. They also have 5 of the top pack SKUs, which is pretty impressive.
What is a pack SKU?
Well, packs being the vape hardware.
Okay.
Jetty produced the pods for them, which are then distributed under white label 2 packs.
Oh, okay.
So, as we see the market moving more and more to derivative products,
yeah.
We saw vape, being a key segment for us. It's about 50% of new consumers come in and enjoy a vape as opposed to smoking a dried flower or a spliff.
Sure.
or what have you. And the market in California is obviously incredibly important. It's a huge market. It's bigger than Canada. It's a very strategic market. I think we've talked about this before, but all of the brand names that will ultimately evolve to be dominant players in the global cannabis sector, we believe, and many others as well, that they'll have their DNA in California. California, for that reason, is a place we wanted to be, and we wanted to be in a big way. So Jetty fit with that strategy perfectly.
Very cool. And so what do the metrics of the deal look like?
Well, we've acquired them for $22.5 million with $7.5 million of earnouts, $25 million worth of shares, and $5 million worth of cash.
Okay.
We expect that transaction to close this quarter. We talk to them virtually every day. We're already beginning, what I call substantive business operating relationships. They're a fantastic team, and we're very excited about working with them.
And what does their balance sheet look like?
Their balance sheet right now is provided primarily by ourselves. We extended them a $2.5 million convertible loan on signing of the transaction. I think we discussed this the last time I was here, actually.
Sure.
That will, collapse upon closing of the transaction.
Right.
But again, it speaks to the thesis of what Cannex is. Cannex is a public holding company accessing capital through the Canadian public markets to deploy into, opportunities that we see a great return on capital. So Cannex's balance sheet will effectively be Jetty's balance sheet, and obviously it's the balance sheet for our operators in Washington. And as we move into subsequent states, which we plan on doing later on this calendar year, again, the same thesis will hold through, that Cannex, as the public holding company, will provide the capital, access to capital, and primarily the public market management requirements. We don't, in Vancouver, where I'm based, we don't get involved in the day-to-day operational aspects of our operating companies. We partner with phenomenal operators and sort of set them loose to do what they're good at.
Yeah, you bet. All right, so you guys are cash flow positive.
We are.
And it surprises me that, looking at the stock chart, that the market just obviously is not putting much of a premium on cash, which is really strange. And why do you think that is? Well,
I think it's a combination of things. And we've talked about this a lot. But when we came to market about a year ago, we thought, and the whole market thought, that the way to access the U.S. market, which is kind of a quiet backwater 12 months ago. Everything has changed in the last year. That the right way to go at it was to acquire, a dominant position in one state, and then move into another, and then do another, and move through it incrementally. And what's happened over the last 6 months is that several of the bigger names, I'm sure you've spoken to some of them, they assembled their multi-state platform, as I call it, before they went public. So now they are a multi-state player as a public company. Once we close the Jetty acquisition, we will now be a multi-state player, and then obviously with additional irons in the fire and hopefully a few more acquisitions in the next 12 months, we will then become sort of back in that multi-state narrative, you will. So the price that we're at today, as far as I'm concerned, represents the most phenomenal opportunity out there to participate in an emerging, profitable multi-state platform.
Okay, so is your intention to keep Cannex US focused, or are you going to look at other jurisdictions? Is Canada in the mix anywhere there?
That's a great question, but I think for the time being we're going to focus on the U.S. I mean, the U.S. is clearly where all the excitement is. It's where the investors are gravitating to. And so unless we find some, exceptional opportunity that falls outside of the U.S. boundaries, if you will, which there are a few.
Yep.
But you know, unless the value is you know, so good that we can't turn it down, I think that 90% of our time is going to be focused on the U.S. You've seen some of the other names I know that have been sitting at this table, and you know, the U.S. is very, very active right now.
Yeah.
The barriers are coming down, the players are coming in, the capital is flowing in, and so really we think we're incredibly well positioned with a dominant place in Washington, you know, an emerging powerhouse in California. I mean, Jetty is a very highly regarded company in that state, and we think they're the best opportunity that we could find as a California, what we call California beachhead.
Sure. To what extent is the banking community sort of bringing down the barricades that had previously made it tough or impossible to be a multi-state player?
Yeah. Well, I don't think you're going to find in any near term where you're going to have a national bank, you know, providing commercial banking services to the cannabis sector. So in Washington, you know, we work through a credit union. You know, the banking relationships in California are also quite unique, although the California state legislature, I believe, recently proposed a state bank exactly for this purpose, to bank the cannabis sector.
The California Cannabis Bank.
Something like that.
Boy, where do you get shares in that?
I also know that, you know, there's quite a lot of discussion going on in Washington, D.C., where some of the federal banks, the federally regulated banks, are looking for, you know, state waivers, for example, where they can provide commercial banking services to the cannabis sector, because it's a $50 billion a year business. I mean, if you're a banker, you would like to provide banking services to that industry.
Yeah, you bet. What about the sort of availability of deal flow and opportunity? There's, I mean, how many Canadian companies are actively down there in every state where cannabis is making progress towards legalization? Everybody's looking for, you know, these profitable, successful brands that already have a huge customer database. Is it becoming more competitive, and is that going to drive up the cost of acquisition for companies like Cannex?
It is becoming more competitive, but I think that there's a sufficient number of players that the price won't get driven up too high. And you know, in terms of quality of deal flow, which is really kind of more important than quantity of deal flow, you know, Ron Gershoni, who's the CEO and founder of Jetty, is incredibly well plugged in California. So if anything is coming to market, he would typically see it before anybody else. One of our other founders, Leo, who runs the Washington State operation, same thing. You know, he's got quite a high profile, so he typically gets shown things quite frequently. And then lastly, you know, our investment bankers, Beacon Securities, you know, after they took us public, which at the time was the largest RTO financing on the CSE for a U.S. focused company, I mean, their deal flow is just incredible. So, you know, we're not short of deals, put it that way.
Yeah, okay, great. Let's leave it there for now. We're going to come back to you in due course and see how you're making out. Thanks for joining me once again.
Thanks very much.